Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Coffee with Craig, where we talk about all things firearms, firearms policy, politics, culture, media, you name it. We're talking about it right here on Coffee with Craig. So please take a moment, like and share the program, and that way your friends can know exactly where the conversation is taking place. Also, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook. And if you haven't already, and make sure you hit the notification button. That way, you'll get notified as soon as we go live, so you guys can participate in the live chat as the show is going on. Also, please visit fpcgear.com. That's fpcgear.com. It's the place to go to get all sorts of Pro 2A swag. We're talking T-shirts, coffee mugs, hoodies, stickers, you name it. We got them all there. But the best part is every dollar that you spend goes right back into the fight for a right to keep and bear arms. So you can support the Second Amendment and you can look good doing it. That's fpcgear.com. Well, folks, it's an election year. It's a presidential election year. Now, we talked like a long time ago about we talked a little bit about where some of the presidential candidates stood on the Democratic side in particular, because we talked about it right after the first presidential debate, and really haven't talked about where they are, what programs they're supporting, or anything like that. We haven't talked about that recently. So as we start to approach the primaries, I wanted to kind of share with you guys exactly where folks stood, so that you could have a better idea of who is worth or worthy of your vote when the election time comes. Now, as you can see, this is a large field of candidates. Not all of these people are still in, and not all of these people are serious candidates. So we're not going to talk about everybody today. We're going to talk about the people who are the serious candidates, and I'll share with you a little bit about why they were the serious candidates, or at least why I consider them serious candidates. You can take my opinion for what it's worth. All right. So first of all, it's important to note that a number of the worst actually have actually dropped out, and that's these folks right here. Now, you guys may recognize these folks. That's I'm gonna take your gun. I'm gonna take your AR, Beto. That's Eric. Let's nuke gun owner Swalwell. And Kamala Harris. Now, I want you to. I think the reason why I have Kamala Harris included here in particular is because she is, of all of them, the only elected official that really spent a significant amount of time during her time as Attorney General, actually going after and undermining our fundamental right to keep and bear arms. She was my Attorney General here in the state of California, and I will tell you, she is dangerous to gun rights. She is also a person. All three of these folks have talked about how they would use executive authority to violate your rights. So it's important that we understand just how dangerous those folks were, and that we are glad that they have all dropped out. Now, let's move on to the legitimate candidates. This is Michael Bloomberg. I realize that he is no stranger to any one of you. He has invested millions of dollars in seeking to violate or take away our fundamental rights. He spent millions of dollars doing research into what anti-gun issues he can get past where. He spent millions of dollars electing politicians who won't question his position or won't question this legislation, but will simply do it and be his puppets. So that's how dangerous we know this guy is. In fact, the very first campaign event that he did was in Aurora, Colorado, at the theater where the shooting took place. It was an anti-gun event. Check it out.
This issue is somewhat personal for me.
Bloomberg came to Aurora to unveil a sweeping federal gun agenda, his first major campaign event since announcing his candidacy.
It just has to stop. No other developed country experiences losses in gun violence like we do here.
The former New York mayor is calling for a national gun licensing system, stricter background checks, and the passage of a federal red flag law. Similar to what Colorado recently passed, the law would let courts take guns from those in mental distress.
Like the one Tom helped pass right here in Colorado.
Wearing his son.
All right, so many things to unpack there. The first thing to understand is that when he talks about the idea of no developed countries, we all know that they handpick countries and they say, okay, these are developed countries, these are underdeveloped countries. And so now we're going to say, yeah, no, it doesn't happen. But you and I both know that is in fact not the case. But once again, this is a guy who has invested millions of his billions. And the reason why he's dangerous, now, mind you, he's a former Republican. He was Republican when he was mayor of New York. He has turned independent and now is running on the Democratic ticket, or running to head the Democratic ticket. The reason why he's dangerous is he's a billionaire. He can outlast anybody because he can spend less than he would spend on lunch in order to run for president. So, And by the way, I'm pretty sure that a lot of this anti-gun stuff that he's been doing has largely been about him positioning himself to run for president. But anyway, he's committed to this, to running. So he's dangerous because of the money and the financial resources that he brings to the table. At least that's my never to be humble opinion. All right. Next on the list, you have Elizabeth Warren. Now, Elizabeth Warren is interesting because, for a while there, she had her moment in the sun where she was considered to be the shining candidate, or the one socialist candidate that really had a shot, right? The serious candidate. In fact, she was so serious that her anti-gun plan, was probably more detailed than anyone else's, as demonstrated here.
Compared to her 2020 rivals, Elizabeth Warren has the most detailed gun control plan. She wants to create a federal licensing system, limit the number of firearms someone could buy, raise the minimum purchasing age to 21, and create stricter background check regulations on private sales, at gun shows and online through executive action.
All right, so first of all, let's be clear. She is all of the candidates, pretty much all of at least the Democratic candidates, support all of the things that were just stated. She's just the only one that's actually put them into her plan, right? Things like violating the rights of adults under the age of 21, individuals who can be handed a firearm and sent halfway around the world to defend our country's interests, but can't have a firearm to defend their own home. She's the one that wants to institute gun confiscation laws. Where basically you guys know what red flag laws are. You don't get a day in court. Someone goes to court and tells the judge you're a danger to yourself or others, and then they issue basically a warrant for your firearms, a restraining order for you not to be able to own them, and then a warrant so that they can seize all of your firearms. That's the sort of things she supports, and universal background checks, which you and I know is nothing more than, well, it's a gun registry. It's a way in which for them to know what firearms you have, so that when the time comes that they want to ban them and confiscate them, they'll know exactly where to come and get them. But the most dangerous part about it was at the very end there, what they were talking about, where she basically said she has said this, she'll do it via executive action. Now, civics lesson. The executive branch enforces law. The legislative branch writes the law. She has said she's not going to wait for the legislative branch to write the law. She is going to do it via executive fiat. In other words, she's going to become a dictator, Pocahontas, and come take our guns. And she's pretty passionate about it, as you can tell from this clip right here.
Gun violence is a national health emergency in this country, and we need to treat it like that. So what can we do? We can do the things that are sensible. We can do the universal background checks. We can ban the weapons of war. But we can also double down on the research and find out what really works, where it is that we can make the differences at the margins that will keep our children safe. We need to treat this like the virus that's killing our children.
So just breaking some of those things down. So we already know that, the overwhelming percentage of non-suicide gun violence, suicide is not quote unquote gun violence, it's suicide. But what she refers to as violence with firearms, overwhelming majority of it is gangs and drugs. I don't need to get into that. If you want to address it, deal with the gang issue in this country, deal with the drug issue in this country. But then again, and I'm talking about illicit drugs. But then again, she don't want to deal with that because that affects too much of the Democratic constituency. So she wants to leave that alone. She don't want to mess with them. She wants to talk about doing research, but what she wants to fund is anti-gun research. Research that, not so much even research, she wants to utilize it to develop propaganda that says that they need to go out and ban guns. And then you have this whole banning of quote-unquote weapons of war. And the sad part is you and I all know, first of all, whatever the hell that means, But she's not the only one. She's not the only one that's interested in the whole concept of weapons of war. We also have the mayor of South Bend. I think it's South Bend, Mr. Pete Buttigieg. I'm sorry, Buttigieg. I prefer to call him Buttigieg because it's a funny ass name. But anyway, but we all know that he's now. The interesting thing about him is that he's a serious candidate because first of all, he's rising in the polls. Number two, he's doing a decent job of being able to raise money. And he is trying to sound sensible. And it's kind of funny because when you listen to him talk, he really sounds like he knows what he's talking about. Except
reforms. That being said, as president, I plan to continue to advocate for, and I think successfully advocate, for things like universal background checks. For us also to tighten up the ability of the federal government to enforce some of this gun trafficking that goes on, which has been one of our focuses among the mayors against illegal guns. And mayors care about this issue because it's the worst part of our job, is getting that message or phone call that we lost another person, usually a young person, to gun violence, or for that matter, to gun suicide in our communities. And, as a mayor who's had that experience time and time again, as mayor who's there when we swear in our cops with their spouses and sometimes children at their side, and does not wish to see them outgunned in their own neighborhoods, as somebody who is very familiar from my military training with weapons of war, somebody who carried a rifle and a pistol around a foreign land on the orders of the president, there are some weapons that just don't belong in our neighborhoods in peacetime in America. We've already decided that this is within the Second Amendment because we've decided that somewhere in between a slingshot and a nuclear weapon, we can draw a line. And that's not unconstitutional, it's common sense. And that's why I think assault rifles need to be on the table too. Thank you.
all right, so let's go back here. So this is a guy who, quote unquote, was in the military. And because he was in the military, obviously he's very familiar because he carried around a rifle and a pistol. So he's very familiar with weapons of war. But I guess the thing that I understand is, so he had a pistol. As he now advocates now, because a pistol, he had it in war. So if he had a pistol, is that pistol now a weapon of war? Is he now advocating for banning semi-automatic handguns? Is that something that he's looking? I don't think that's what he intended. At least that's not what he meant to say. He talks about well, we should ban assault rifles. Well, does he not recognize the difference between an assault rifle, which is actually in a military term, for the automatic firearms that are used, or the automatic rifles that are used by our military, probably one of which he used when he was, or he carried around when he was in the military? Does he not know the difference between that and the commonly termed assault weapon that many of his colleagues refer to, or that they've had to actually now change what they refer to them as assault style rifles, because they realize that they're not really assault rifles, they're assault style in that they have things on them that make them look assaulty, and that they look scary. So they can't call them assault rifles anymore. They call them assault-like rifles. But he wants to ban assault rifles. Well, I mean, with very few exceptions, right? Unless you have specific licenses and things along those lines, individual civilians can't get assault rifles. You can't go out and buy one. So, I mean, I don't get what you're saying, Mr. Buttigieg. I'm not comfortable with the terminology that you're using. You're saying that we made this decision that's somewhere between a slingshot, which, by the way, as far as I know, is regulated, and a nuclear weapon, which obviously I don't see how it can be considered arms, since most of us can't really utilize a nuclear weapon that I know of. Anyway, I won't get into all of that. But the point that I'm making here is that you create a false dichotomy because you don't even know the difference between a weapon that is actually used in war, or a firearm that is, you can't even tell the difference between a firearm that already we aren't able to possess and one that you're trying to ban. And yet you want me to believe that you know enough because you carried them around. You know enough to be able to tell. No, man, forget you. Anyway, but that's Mr. Buttigieg. That's kind of where he stands on the Second Amendment. You can tell it ain't nowhere nice. And now we have Mr. Bernie Sanders. Now, before Mr. Bernie Sanders decided to run for president 4 years ago, he actually was, well, for a Democrat, I mean, for a socialist Democrat, was considered to be, reasonably pro-gun. Or at least his position was it wasn't a federal issue. It was a states' rights issue. And it was kind of funny when in the first presidential debate when, here's how you acknowledge and that he changed his position once he decided to run for president, once he contradicts himself.
Senator Sanders, a Vermont newspaper recently released portions of an interview you gave in 2013 in which you said, quote, "My own view on guns is everything being equal, states should make those decisions."
No.
Has your thinking changed since then? Do you now think there's a federal role to play?
That's a mischaracterization of my thinking.
It's a
Look,
quote of
we have a gun crisis right now. 40,000 people a year are getting killed. In 1988, Rachel, when it wasn't popular, I ran on a platform of banning assault weapons and, in fact, lost that race for Congress.
And ever since then, he has not touched the issue of guns in an attempt, until he decided to run for president. Then when he became president, all of a sudden he rediscovered his anti-gun roots. But even with that, he still is trying to hold on a little bit and trying not to seem as anti-gun as those he's running against.
Sanders' proposal vaguely states that, quote, all gun purchases should be subject to the same background check standards.
Right. And so, that's kind of where he stands on background checks. It should be all, just everybody. They should have the same standards. But hasn't really put together a detailed plan because he knows that, quite frankly, in his home state of Vermont, taking a fully anti-gun state will definitely harm him. But, let me clarify. At least now in the debates, he's now acting like, okay, hey, whatever. He just wants to be in this thing. So his position has devolved over time. And clearly we know that he is not going to be a defender of our fundamental right to keep and bear arms. And then we have good old Joe Biden. Joe Biden he's nothing if not fun. He's fun because, first of all, let's hear a little bit about some of his policies, and then we'll get to the fun part of Mr. Biden.
Biden also wants to expand background checks to private sales, but he would allow family members to gift firearms without any background check on the person receiving the guns.
Okay, so once again, that's his position on background checks. But once again, all of these guys all support the same anti-gun stuff. They all support red flag laws. They all support the idea of expanding universal background checks, which basically is gun registration. They all support the idea of an assault weapons ban, to be clear, I forgot to use my quotes. I'm sorry, but they call it assault weapons ban. We call it a ban on all semi-automatic centerfire rifles. And some actually want to expand that to include rimfire rifles as well, which would make it basically everything with a detachable magazine they want to ban. So just to be clear, we all know that they all support all of those things. But Joe Biden goes a step beyond, in particular in the first debate, and makes some claims of things that he supports and things that he's done and wants to do that are head and shoulders above the rest in their stupidity.
I'm the only person that's beaten the NRA nationally. I'm the guy that got the Brady Bill passed, the background checks, number one. Number two, we increased that background check during the Obama-Biden administration. I'm also the only guy that got assault weapons banned, and the number of clips in a gun banned. And so, folks, look, and I would buy back those weapons. We already started talking about that. We try to get it done. I think it can be done, and it should be demanded that we do it, and that's a good expenditure of money. And lastly, we should have smart guns. No gun should be able to be sold unless your biometric measure could pull that trigger. It's within our right to do that. We can do that. Our enemy is the gun manufacturers, not the NRA. The gun manufacturer.
Mr. Vice President,
Wow. So this is a guy, you could tell he's already trying to run to the center because, look, he's like, oh, it's not gun owners are not the problem. It's the gun manufacturers. It's not the NRA. I don't want to make the NRA mad at me. So it's not the NRA. But I'm just, okay, so unpacking a lot of this. So in other words, he wants to mandate smart guns, which you and I both know are dumb guns. And dumb in that, well, we all know that you guys have all seen the videos where these things inside of minutes are hacked and the firearms are then rendered useless, or an individual who is not the owner is in fact able to utilize the firearm. So first of all, we've already all seen that. All right. We all know that. But here's the question I would have. If he is so sure that these things work, I want to see him go to police unions. And I want him to go to those unions. I want him to tell them, you're going to be our testing ground. You're going to get to use these firearms first. Matter of fact, we're going to mandate that law enforcement use these firearms exclusively. And I guarantee you, the amount of money that will be put to people opposing Joe Biden, just from the police unions, just from law enforcement unions alone, will ensure that he would not get elected dog catcher if that were the case. And that's because even they know this technology is not proven, it is not safe, and it does not work. Anytime you add anything electronic, anything that requires power, anything that requires a computer to a firearm, you know that you are setting yourself up for potential failure. And when that thing fails, chances are it's going to wind up failing when you need it most, when your life is in danger. But, you know, hey, Mr. Biden's interested in getting elected president, so we all know that that's not really a priority for him. But he is the front runner, and that's the reason why it's important that we take a look at him. Just like, by the way, and I forgot to mention, the point of behind Bernie Sanders is he's raised more money than anybody. This last quarter, he raised more money than any other candidate. So that's why he's important. That's why I still consider viable and the guy we need to keep an eye on. And this guy is in the polls, in most polls, still considered the front runner, even though he's not raising money at a pace in which he needs to keep up with some of the other candidates. But anyway, that's Mr. Joe Biden. And then we have our good friend, President Donald Trump. Now, President Trump has been on both sides of this issue. And in fact, here's an example dealing with background checks where he's been on both sides, out of his own mouth.
Even President Trump has shown support for universal background checks and closing the private sale exemption, but he's flip-flopped.
I think we can do meaningful, very meaningful background checks. I want to see it happen. For the most part, as strong as you make your background checks, they would not have stopped any of it.
So, all right, now, the bad. All right, we already know that he's already exceeded executive authority and banned bump stocks. And some of you out there are like, well, I don't care about bump stocks, but you know, if we allow the president to use executive authority, abuse executive authority, to ban a firearm or a part we don't care about, what's to keep them from banning or a firearm part that we do care about? And we've already heard from a number of Democratic candidates that they will use executive powers the same way in which this guy did. They'll use it the same way in which he did to ban bump stocks. So he's already set the precedent, right? So it's important that we so anyway, so that's why that is an issue. He's already been in support of red flag laws. Remember the famous quote, take the guns first, due process later. We already know that he said he doesn't like suppressors, even though he hasn't, as far as I know, he hasn't taken any policy, he hasn't done anything policy-wise or administratively dealing with suppressors, but he's already said that he doesn't like suppressors. He's already said he's in favor of restricting adults, law-abiding adults under the age of 21 from being able to own or purchase firearms. So those are the bads. All right. Now, the good is that you remember when our veterans, if they had a fiscal agent, someone who was handling their finances for them, their finance for them, they were being deemed unfit mentally to be able to own or possess firearms and losing the right to keep and bear arms. He overturned that. He also helped overturn when they were doing the same exact thing to those to senior citizens who were getting Social Security. So those are a couple of good things that he's done. He's also appointed a large number of pro-Second Amendment judges. And we know that as these state legislatures, as these city councils are making decisions that are clearly in violation of the Constitution, we know how important the courts are. And he's appointing judges that believe in the Second Amendment. So he's done a great job for us there. So, he's kind of on both. He may be on both sides, but there's one thing that we know for sure. He's definitely better than anybody that's on the other side. And by the other side, you guys know exactly what I mean. But anyway, that's exactly where Donald Trump is. So this is our field of candidates. As we know, some of them are still in it. Some of them are not. Some of them are the walking dead and just don't know it yet. Some of them are just trying to get their name out there for whatever it is that they want to get their name out there for. And probably will wind up dropping out. But these are amongst this group of people are the people that will likely be presidential nominees going into the general election. So that kind of gives you an idea of what that is. Now, let me just say this: is I happen to believe, me personally, that there's a bunch of F's and F minuses in this, and there quite possibly is one D. Maybe D plus, maybe C minus when it comes to the Second Amendment. And it's important for us to understand, as much as I would like to have someone who 100% is my right to keep and bear arms, I have to choose from what I have to choose from. And it's important that we choose the person who best represents us on the Second Amendment, that best represents us on the Second Amendment. So take a look at the field. And then by the way, then we hold that individual accountable for supporting our fundamental right to keep and bear arms. So take a look at that. Take that for what it's worth. Once again, the election is going to be coming up soon. Hopefully we will have an opportunity. I wish we had better choices when it comes to the Second Amendment, but we don't. But hopefully, if you want that choice, if you want to have that better choice, start identifying those people now. Support them when they run for city council. Support them when they run for county supervisor. Support them when they run for state legislature or statewide office or Congress or Senate. And that way you then have a choice when it comes time to vote for someone for president. But you got to start early. Identify them early. Let them know early how important the Second Amendment is to you and your community. All right, folks, that's going to be it for today's Coffee with Craig. I very much appreciate you guys tuning in. I appreciate you liking and sharing this program. Telling your friends about the Firearms Policy Coalition. We are the home in the fight for civil rights. Got to use them or you're going to lose them. You guys take care.
If you like our videos, follow, subscribe, like, and share.